from around the world. And from CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. And tonight, a special report, Bill Moyers on the Alaska gas pipeline, the $37 billion congressional burnout.
Good evening. A carefully coordinated hijacking of 3 Venezuelan airplanes ended late today in Havana. More than 100 hostages were released safely. But a third of the world away, in Beirut, another hijacking continued unresolved. A hijacked Libyan jet with at least 38 hostages crisscrossed the eastern Mediterranean, ending up, for the time being at least, back where it began the day's journey. Richard Roth has that story.
In a hijack already more than 24 hours old, 3 Muslim extremists today took their jet from Beirut to Athens and Rome before returning to Beirut. Before dawn, the white and gold Libyan Airways jet flew into Beirut from Switzerland, taking on food, water, fuel, and reportedly 2 more terrorists carrying explosives. Athens was the next stop in the armed odyssey. The plane's hijackers were demanding an investigation into the disappearance of a Shiite imam, a Muslim religious leader who vanished 3 years ago in Libya. Lebanese Shiites claim the Gaddafi regime has jailed the religious leader. The hijackers called on Lebanon to break relations with Libya. Soon airborne again, within 90 minutes, the 727 jet was circling Rome's Ciampino Airport, a charter and military field where medical and security personnel were standing by. Italian officials authorized a landing. The pilot had said he needed fuel. When the plane taxied to the end of a runway, fuel was delivered, but there was no break in the siege. Fragments of radio talks between the jet and the control tower indicated the hijackers felt they had nothing to negotiate in Italy. In 3 hours, they were airborne once more, returning to Beirut, where one of the hijackers tonight told an Italian journalist, "We're going to rest and then see what we'll do next." Richard Roth, CBS News, Rome.
At Beirut's airport tonight, there was massive confusion. Heavily armed members of a Shiite militia group occupied the grounds. They are supporters of the Muslims who hijacked the Libyan jet. Soon after that plane landed in Beirut, other supporters of the hijackers stormed a Middle East Airlines jet that just arrived from London. They took about 43 persons hostage and demanded airport authorities refuel the Libyan jet. There was a brief and tense standoff, but then a Shiite religious leader boarded the plane and convinced the would-be hijackers to leave. At last report, the Libyan jet had been towed to a far end of the airport and had not been refueled. The triple hijacking of those Venezuelan planes became an arduous odyssey through Central America. And at journey's end, it is not known what happened to the hijackers' demands for $10 million and the release of certain political prisoners. Peter Collins has this story.
2 days, 3 aircraft, 7 countries. From Venezuela yesterday to Barranquilla, Colombia. From there, the aircraft split. One touched down briefly in El Salvador before going on to Honduras for most of the night. It was joined there by a second plane. A third went to Guatemala. All 3 were reunited in Panama this morning before flying on to Cuba. Each aircraft was under the control of at least 3 hijackers, heavily armed with grenades and pistols. At the start, about 300 hostages were aboard the 3 planes. All the women and children and a few men were released at the first stop for fuel and food in Barranquilla. Some of the released hostages told CBS News the hijackers seemed calm and appeared to have a good idea of what they were doing and where they were going. They said the hijackers were wearing black ski masks and referred to each other only by numbers. The hijackers handed out what looked like bumper stickers with revolutionary slogans and read a political statement aboard the aircraft. It condemned what it called United States imperialism and urged Latin American countries to unite in support of the revolution in El Salvador. At noon, the 3 aircraft landed safely at Havana Airport, where the hostages were released. The Cuban news agency said nothing about the hijackers. Cuba has been jailing ordinary hijackers for years, but this was a political stunt to promote revolution in El Salvador, and that revolution has the official support of the Cuban government. Peter Collins, CBS News, Miami.
All over the world, beautiful women know that beautiful skin begins with good cleansing. That's why all over the world, more women cleanse with this cleansing cream than any other. It's a hypoallergenic, non-drying, deep cleaning cleansing cream. It's Pond's Cold Cream. And it helps make more women beautiful than any other cleansing cream in the world.
Darling, the tree is perfect. Andre Champagne.
It's the holidays, and someone thought enough to bring Andre.
Not the same without the gift.
Maybe next year. Here's to the one who makes every day Christmas Day.
It's the holidays, and someone thought enough to bring Andre.
An explosion late today collapsed a coal mine shaft near Palmer, some 25 miles from Chattanooga in eastern Tennessee. A spokesman a few minutes ago said as many as a dozen miners may be trapped at the Tennessee Consolidated Coal Company mine number 21. This accident comes just one day after 8 miners died following an explosion in Topmost, Kentucky. Well, President Reagan was officially handed today the bad economic news that his aides made public yesterday, that what he has said about holding down the nation's budget deficit doesn't figure to happen. Leslie Stahl reports from the White House.
During a budget review meeting today, the president was told that the budget deficit for fiscal 1982 will probably climb as high as $100 billion because of the recession, making his first budget deficit the highest of any president's in history. Moreover, he was told by his economic advisors that even with new budget cuts and tax increases, the deficits for 1983 and 84 could remain in the $90 billion range. Even though the president ran on a platform of balancing the budget, his economic advisors are now playing down the importance of large deficits.
Deficits are a problem. They're important, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is to restore the health of the economy. I think we're in a period of transition to a healthier economy. I see by the middle of next year and on into 83 and for several years beyond, a strong economy with rising employment and declining inflation simultaneously.
But on Capitol Hill, the Democrats were saying that all the administration's economic predictions have been off by a great magnitude.
I guess you could say if you liked President Carter's deficits, you're going to love President Reagan's deficits. I'm not asking him to make a public confession, but he is simply going to have to come to the Congress and say, these tax cuts went much too far. We simply are going to have to rescind them.
But White House officials say there is no chance of the president backing down on the tax cut, and that despite complaints from many of his cabinet secretaries, Mr. Reagan is likely to approve over the next 2 weeks massive budget cuts close to $40 billion for next year. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
If the state of Michigan once represented the nation's industrial might, it now may represent the nation's industrial plight. And as Eric Ingberg reports, Michigan was the scene today of attacks on President Reagan for the state's economic woes.
1 of every 16 unemployed Americans lives in Michigan, where today thousands of union members marched on the state capitol in Lansing to protest Reagan economic policy and state efforts to cut workmen's compensation. At about the same time, some of the president's congressional foes trooped into Detroit, now the statistical capital of the U.S. recession, with a 16% unemployment rate. The House Democrats, losers in Washington's economic battles with the president, are trying to shift the battle lines into the big cities. At public hearings, they are getting what they came for from carefully chosen witnesses, such as Greg Youngblood, a Detroit auto worker who has been out of work for a year and a half.
I'm not complaining much. I serve my country well, but Mr. Reagan's cutting my throat, and I don't like it at all.
The Republicans call these field hearings in depressed cities a partisan show, but have decided to participate in self-defense. Detroit's Democratic Mayor Coleman Young, who raised taxes and froze city payrolls as the recession bit into revenues, seized on the president's recent comment that Americans can always vote with their feet and leave cities which offer poor services.
I don't think that we've reached the luxury in America of throwaway cities, disposable cities. Can you imagine the French people debating whether or not Paris, whether or not the citizens of Paris should vote with their feet?
Auto Workers Union President Douglas Frazier predicting continued bad news for the car industry said the federal cuts are devastating his members.
When all of us have a chance to look back at 1981, I'm afraid that the verdict's going to be that America has really lost its compassion, it's lost its heart, and I hope only temporarily lost their way.
A strong undercurrent beneath this congressional roadshow is the suggestion by Democrats that the administration is willing to let the older, traditionally Democratic cities of the Frost Belt bear the brunt of budget cuts, while the more Republican Sun Belt, with its high-tech industries, enjoys the benefits of increased defense spending. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Detroit.
The Supreme Court ruled today that a student group has the right to hold religious services at a public university. Bruce Morton has more.
The case involved a Christian evangelical group of perhaps 20 students called Cornerstone. In 1977, the University of Missouri at Kansas City barred Cornerstone from conducting religious services on university facilities, citing a university regulation, state law, and the constitutional separation of church and state. The students appealed, citing the Constitution too, freedom of speech and religion. The university argued it didn't object to religious groups, but that actual religious services on campus implied university approval of and support for that religious group. The students argued they were being excluded from facilities used by all kinds of other student groups, political clubs, for instance. Today, the Supreme Court ruled for the students, 8-1. Justice Lewis Powell, for the majority, wrote that regulation of speech should be neutral, that the university could not discriminate against speech with a religious context. The decision will make it easier for religious groups, including cults, to meet on college campuses. It seems not to signal any shift in the court's ban on things like prayer in school classrooms. The issue, Powell said, is narrow, simply that facilities open to some student groups should be open to all. Bruce Morton, CBS News, at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I have a tension headache. Feels like someone is compressing my brain.
Would you try extra strength Tylenol? You can't buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription.
I have to see what it does for me.
Look at the difference in the amount of medicine in the leading pain relievers.
Extra strength Tylenol has more pain reliever. I have to try it. No pain, no pressure. Extra strength Tylenol is a super product.
Try extra strength Tylenol, aspirin-free, and you can't buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription.
Home fires can get a good start before smoke reaches the smoke detector upstairs. Fire prevention experts agree one just isn't enough. First Alert, America's leading producer of smoke detectors, recommends this plan. One smoke detector on the basement ceiling, another on the main floor, and a third upstairs. Your escape route should have the First Alert with escape light. The First Alert plan. The earlier the warning, the more time to escape.
Now there's a new traveling First Alert, too.
Sources have told White House correspondent Bill Plant tonight that U.S. intelligence not only has the names of the so-called Libyan hit squad, but also composite drawings of them. More now on the assassination squad story from Fred Graham in Washington.
The National Security Council convened at the White House for the second straight day of meetings with President Reagan on what to do about the alleged Libyan assassination threat. A decision is not expected for up to 48 hours, and none of the discussions were disclosed. But the likely options are thought to be an embargo on importing Libyan oil into the United States, a freeze on exporting U.S. oil drilling equipment to Libya, and withdrawal of all American oil companies and their personnel from Libya. On Capitol Hill, Senator Gary Hart asked the Senate to pass a resolution urging the president to at least cut off imports of Libyan oil. But Republican leader Baker said the White House had asked the Senate not to limit the president's flexibility before he makes a decision, and Hart agreed to wait a few more days. Hart said he believes the American people are ready to support a Libyan oil boycott, even if it means a return to long gas lines.
I don't think the American people would support subsidization of a terrorist in order to prevent gas lines. They proved that time and time again.
Oil industry analyst Dan Lundberg says a boycott of Libyan oil would have little or no impact on U.S. supplies, but that certain boycott actions could hurt the Libyans.
If the United States were to prohibit any activity of American oil companies in Libya on any basis at all, that would be very hurtful to Libya, because they need technical assistance.
A growing number of officials in Washington have been saying that there's been too much talk and too much publicity about the whole Libyan affair. And yesterday, the White House passed the word throughout the government to begin saying only no comment. Fred Graham, CBS News, Washington.
The defense ministers of NATO were put on notice today by the new socialist prime minister of Greece, Andreas Papandreou. He said that the plan signed last year, under which Greece, with its 180,000 troops, rejoined NATO's military structure, is no longer acceptable. Ike Pappas reports from the NATO meeting in Brussels.
Papandreou told the NATO defense ministers he rejects the agreement because it calls for Greece to give up total control of the airspace over the Aegean Sea and to share it with neighboring Turkey. Papandreou believes that would increase chances of an attack from Turkey, a NATO ally but a longtime enemy of Greece. Papandreou indicated he wanted the agreement to include guarantees from NATO that Turkey would remain peaceful. Otherwise, he said, the Greek people have given him the mandate to withdraw the troops.
It is within this framework that we are forced to consider a process of disengagement from agreements that are prejudicial to Greece, do not guarantee our frontiers, and undermine the existing status quo in the Aegean, which has been established by international agreements and treaties.
American defense officials are pessimistic NATO will renegotiate the agreement or provide the guarantees. NATO has been jarred by the possibility that Greece will pull its forces out because that would substantially weaken NATO's southern flank and increase chances of a Soviet attack. Papandreou also says he may shut American military bases in Greece if negotiations, which begin next year, do not prove successful. Secretary of State Alexander Haig will arrive here tomorrow for the NATO foreign ministers meeting and will also meet with Papandreou to determine if solutions to the Greek grievances can be worked out. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Brussels.
The Federal Trade Commission said today it will try to block Mobil's attempted takeover of Marathon Oil Company. The FTC will apply to a federal court tomorrow for a temporary injunction against the merger. Mobil has bid $6.5 billion for Marathon stock, but Marathon has agreed to merge with U.S. Steel instead.
Elegance at your fingertips, it puts a smile on everyone's lips. Libby Glass.
Put a smile on the lips of everyone on your gift list this season with the style and elegance of a gift from Libby Glass. Look for our beautiful holiday packages wherever you shop. Then give the gift that says something beautiful to people about you.
Elegance at your fingertips, it puts a smile on everyone's lips. Libby Glass.
The lime and lemon taste of Sprite joins your celebrations. The taste of lime and mixes right on holiday occasions. Sprite makes brighter holidays. Lemon is the reason. Sprite goes well so many ways to bring you cheer this season.
The House today began considering a financing package for a new $37 billion Alaska natural gas pipeline. The Senate already has approved this legislation, which could force consumers to start paying for parts of the pipeline before it's completed. Supporters argue that's the only way to tap Alaska's huge gas reserves. But Bill Moyers has found out that there's much more to this story. Bill?
Dan, if you want to know why so many Americans are fed up with both political parties and have simply stopped voting, and if you have a strong stomach, I have a case in point.
What's the count?
It starts with this man. His name is John McMillian. He's chairman of the Northwest Alaska Pipeline Company. 4 years ago, the federal government gave him exclusive rights to build a big pipeline to bring gas all the way from Alaska to consumers in 42 states. He got that franchise on the condition that the pipeline would be built with private funds. But now John McMillian wants to change the rules.
I'll see you.
He says he's having trouble getting the banks to finance the project, and he wants the consumers to put up the money before the project is finished and whether or not a drop of gas is ever delivered. That's right. He wants the government to force consumers to be his investors. They would assume the risks of stockholders, but without voting rights or dividends. Senator Howard Metzenbaum was the only member of the Energy and National Resources Committee to vote against the pipeline bill.
How can anybody possibly vote for such a piece of legislation? How could anybody go home and explain that to their own constituents? It's raw. It's a bad deal.
Lest you think it's just a liberal Democrat eating sour grapes, listen to a conservative Republican, Congressman Tom Corcoran of Illinois.
Here we have probably potentially the greatest consumer ripoff in the history of the United States. $37 billion, and in the debate on our committee, we heard very little from some of those same people on the Democratic side who had been arguing for years and vociferously in behalf of the Consumer Protection Agency. I think they took a walk on this one, probably for political reasons.
No wonder John McMillian is smiling. The government is giving him what he wants, lock, stock, and barrel, and with very little public debate.
Don't worry. Bye.
How did he do it? Well, pretend you're John McMillian and you want the federal government to change the rules after the game has already started. First, you make friends with the president, because only the president can submit to Congress the resolution to undo the rules agreed upon 4 years ago. And naturally, you hire the public relations firm of Peter Hannaford, former partner of Mike Deaver, one of the president's inner circle. Hannaford, you'll remember, purchased the consulting firm owned by National Security Advisor Richard Allen. But once you get the Republicans on your side, what about the Democrats? You need their leadership to limit public debate on your proposal. Well, you hire former Vice President Walter Mondale to be a consultant to your firm. Then you contribute $5,000 to the Committee for the Future of America, Mondale's Political Action Committee. But one high-powered Democrat isn't enough. Not for a big job like this.
Where's Bob?
Strauss? I'll call him. He's in Washington. He just got in.
That's right, Robert Strauss. Robert Strauss is an old friend of John McMillian. He's also the former chairman of the Democratic Party and a man who knows how to wheel and deal in Congress. Want more clout? How about another firm, White, Fine, and Verville, one of whom served as the chairman of the Federal Power Commission under Lyndon Johnson. And the law firm of Charles Manette. Charles Manette, the current chairman of the Democratic Party? Yes, Charles Manette. And all the while you spread money around. Just look at the contributions McMillian has made in the last 4 years.
We've seen a magnificent lobbying effort in connection with this bill. You couldn't hire some of the lobbyists that were hired in this instance. You couldn't have the impact that has been had in this instance without spending a lot of money. And I would say to you that when you can spread that kind of money around, you can be certain it's going to have an impact, it's going to provide access, and it's going to provide votes.
But if you are John McMillian, you don't stop with using your own money. You ask other companies with an interest in the pipeline to put up too. And they do. $80,000 showered on Congress since January alone.
Not long ago, one of my staffers called a staffer for another senator and said, your senator going to be with us on this issue? And the response was, oh no, he couldn't be with you. He took a lot of money from the oil companies during his campaign. Now that actually happened.
And presto, your bill breezes through the Senate under rules so unusual that debate was limited to only 1 hour. Yep, 1 hour to debate a project that will cost tens of billions of dollars.
John McMillian is going to have a happy Christmas, and a lot of consumers for 20 years, in my judgment, are going to have to pay the price.
Shifting the burden of investment from corporations to consumers wasn't the only way to finance this project. But other alternatives were never considered because John McMillian and the companies know the right people in the right place at the right price. So much for all that Republican talk about free enterprise, and so much for a Democratic Party controlled by lawyers and lobbyists who have offered its soul to the company store. On this bill, the two-party system was not up for grabs. It was up for sale. Dan?
Thank you, Bill. I'll be back with news from London in a minute.
The shower massage by Teledyne Waterpick is more than just a way to get clean.
Rain on my chest, soap in my hair.
It has a variety of settings to suit your moods, from fine spray
Just love, I give you clean love.
to an invigorating, pulsating massage.
Ow! Get off my back!
The shower massage can make you feel like a whole different person.
Pesto di noche.
If it's from Teledyne Waterpick, you'll feel good about it.
To help reduce dependence on foreign oil, Conoco is forcing more oil out of America's old fields. This Texas field originally held 93 million barrels of oil. By conventional methods, we got out 16 million barrels. By pumping in water, we pushed out another 4 million. Now we're injecting carbon dioxide to push out still more oil. It's expensive, but we'll keep at it. Conoco, now combined with DuPont for a better energy future.
It's always snowing on those Christmas cards depicting ye old Charles Dickens' London. But the cold truth is that it hardly ever snows in England, and when it does, the English are at a bit of a loss as to how to cope. Still, as John Blackstone reports from London tonight, they do manage to muddle through.
The maxim of the British people, said Winston Churchill, is business as usual. That may be true in war, but not in snow. Compared with the North American-style blizzard, what hit London and southern England this morning was little more than a sprinkling, about 2 inches. But normal life halted. For drivers, it was described as the worst morning in a decade. Traffic jams stretched as far as 10 miles. Many trains stopped running, and so did subways and buses. At London's Heathrow Airport, the seldom-used snowplow operators went on strike. Most flights were delayed and many canceled. For some people, though, it was business as usual, including Princess Diana. She drove her own car 2 miles through the snow to visit St. Mary's Junior School. And the rugby teams from Oxford and Cambridge played on, a 100th match between the two universities. Cambridge won 9-6. For others, the snow presented a different problem: where to find food.
They need a bit of help this weather to keep warm. They need a bit extra.
British bookmakers, who will take bets on just about anything, studied today's weather and immediately lowered their odds against a white Christmas here from 10-1 to 5-1. John Blackstone, CBS News, London.
And that's the CBS Evening News for this Tuesday. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Good night.
Nowadays, there are all sorts of ways of saving and investing money that help fight inflation. The problem is finding the plan that's most profitable for you, because now you're forced to swim through a maze of confusing options. And you also have to think about the new individual retirement accounts. But there is a way to escape all this confusion. It's by calling or visiting your full-service bank. For professional guidance with your financial future, we've got the answers.
This is the great chef and wine connoisseur, Gerard Boyer, owner of one of France's great treasures, the famed 3-star restaurant G&G Boyer. Recently, he compared 2 California Chablis.
I tasted Taylor California Cellars Chablis and Almaden Mountain, and I prefer Taylor California Cellars. It has better bouquet, better flavor, and it goes better with food than Almaden.
Taylor California Cellars, a better Chablis. Judge for yourself.
From around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. This is CBS.
Thousands of people are paying for safe driving classes, but Metro isn't getting a penny of that money. And a coal mine explosion near Sewanee will have details coming up next on Eyewitness News.
Mrs. Murtis?
Yes?
Singing telegram. This night will be unforgettable. This feeling so agreeable.
Bob!
It seems like nothing's impossible.
You remembered our anniversary.
This night is unmistakably steak and ale.
The steak, the place, the feeling. This night is unmistakable.
Are you surprised?